I took a photo lineup back to this woman. And I said, well, I found out some things about your house, but I wanted to ask you first, before I tell you anything, do any of these guys look familiar? And she immediately points to the former owner of the house and said, that's the guy that we see in the bedroom.
Hey, what's up? I'm Corey Davenport.
I'm Nicole Gorey.
You're watching Sunken Press Podcast. Tonight, we got Alton's own Troy Taylor. Yeah, he is a master of the weird, the macabre, the ghoulish, the ghostly, the ghastly, everything in between. He has his own podcast as well.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, he's on there with my friend Cody Beck. Yeah, he's very well informed about ghosts. Like, he knows more about ghosts than I know about anything.
Usually you are the paranormal expert, so.
I know when I've been bested. This man's books are why I'm into
I'm going to ask him about Nessie, because I know that you don't believe in Nessie,
Dude,
but
Nessie
I believe
isn't
in Nessie.
real.
Nessie's real.
Nessie's not real.
Nessie's real.
I don't want to fight you on it because I want Nessie to be real. I love the concept of lake monsters. Mm-hmm. See, you're wasting Troy Taylor with Nessie. He's an Alton ghost guy.
And I get that. I want to, but before
okay,
the episode ends, I want to ask him one time. We can wait for it. We can wait.
All right.
I want to know.
So yeah, here's Troy.
We're
going to talk at him.
He's going to confirm my suspicions that Nessie's real.
No, he's not.
Yes, he is.
All right. So we have Troy Taylor here, and a lot of people know I love the paranormal. You're one of the reasons.
Oh,
you used to.
Nice.
Didn't you have a bookshop kind of by
Yes.
St. Mary's at one point?
I did. I did for about 8 years. Yeah.
And I used to buy books from there about the paranormal, which has gotten me deep into the lore of just paranormal in general. I know, like, you focus on ghosts, correct? Like, of everything? Or
Mostly, yeah. I don't do, like, UFOs.
Oh, that's my bag.
I know. It's cool, I guess, but for me, there's only so many different ways to go. So usually ghosts and true crime is more my speed and all the history behind it. I like the stories. It's like Bigfoot. I love Bigfoot and monster stories, but I kind of like the funny side of it. I don't really take it very seriously. It's not that the possibility isn't there. I mean, why not, right? But once it got into like Bigfoot is an interdimensional being, and I'm like,
yeah.
I'm out.
That's
out.
where I go right in. That's where I tag in.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on Nessie? Because I like Nessie, and I said I had to ask you because I love Nessie, and I was gonna. This is just a perfect in. Because
and the same thing. I mean, as long as you don't try to sell me on the idea that she's a time traveler or something.
No.
Do I think it's possible that a whole family of these dinosaurs got stuck in this lake and they keep coming around? Yeah, sure, why not? I mean, why not? I mean, it's all fun. It's all fun until you get into the Bermuda Triangle, and that's where you lose me because.
Oh, see, I love the Bermuda Triangle.
I know it's an interesting story, but. Yeah, don't.
Listen,
this is one of these things that got me into a lot of trouble with our podcast, talking about the Bermuda Triangle and listing all of the historical realisms of it and how none of them really are real.
Can you list a few for us?
There's only a couple of disappearances that took place. And if you look at how many things disappeared at the Bermuda Triangle, and then you look at all these other places around the world, it's really not that many because most of the things that get listed for the Bermuda Triangle didn't actually happen there. It's just that somebody back in the 70s when it was a lot harder to check records, just came up with all these, there's a ship that disappeared. Let's say it was in the Bermuda Triangle. And then you start going through it and you're going, oh, wait a minute, that's not there. That was somewhere else. And so, yeah, I ended up, I got a stalker because of the Bermuda Triangle. I'm not joking.
Like a diehard triangle truther?
Yes.
Jesus.
I got all kinds of hate mail and all kinds of just constant emails. And then they took on all these different identities so they could leave us bad reviews.
What?
And I'm not joking. This is a true story. And so I don't usually talk about it very much. So this is a rare time when
Please
I'm talking
no one
about
stalk
it.
him for this.
Yeah, please
Okay.
don't. Yeah, I really do have a list of all the historical stuff to debunk it, but they weren't interested in it being debunked. And I thought it was a joke at first. I thought they were kidding me.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, I don't know how old you are to this person. I said, but when I was a kid, back in the 70s when I was, 11, 12 years old, there were all these documentaries that used to play in the movie theaters about Bigfoot and Noah's Ark and all this stuff. And my parents took us to see, we went to the movies all the time. So they always took us to see all this stuff. And, there were all these great Bermuda Triangle documentaries and stuff, and so I ate it up when I was a kid. But, unfortunately, you get older and you start looking and you're going, oh, wait a minute, that's not exactly correct. And then, that's what gets you into trouble, is you ruin people's childhoods. And I did not mean to.
Of all fields of paranormal research, the Bermuda Triangle is not the one I would pick out to have a stalker. Like, I've met insane Bigfoot people. I've even met insane pie-slow bird people.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Never met an insane Bermuda Triangle
Yeah,
person.
well, it was a first for me.
You delve into the history of things, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, like with everything at the Bermuda Triangle that people just threw together, they did that in Alton, too.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like, most of
it's
our
all the
ghost
time.
stories aren't real.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff with a lot of bad information behind them, and that's where you get into problems with, the 400 people apparently that drowned in the basement of the Mineral Springs Hotel instead of literally one guy ever. But yeah, it's but you get all the stories and.
Who says 400?
Oh, I was exaggerating.
Oh no,
but there's
that's
a
really
lot.
shitty lifeguard.
No, there's that was me exaggerating. But
Okay.
but there are a lot of stories about people who supposedly drowned in that pool, and it just didn't happen. They just aren't real. And, I run into that a lot. I mean, the one from not even just Alton, but just our area, the big one I always run into is the monkey boy at the Limp Mansion in St. Louis.
Wait, there's a monkey boy?
Well, no, there isn't. That's the point. But there was a story about how apparently the Limps had like a deformed child or something, something wrong with the child, whether they were, physically, mentally challenged somehow. So they hid this child up in the attic so no one would know about it. And then it died up there and then now haunts the attic. And I'm like, well, where did this story come from? Well, apparently a psychic was in the attic one day and sensed this, monkey boy that lived in the attic at one time and came up with this entire creative story about it, not a lick of which is true, and that his name was Zeke. And I'm thinking, okay, let's just be like for real for a minute and look at the children that the Lim family had. You've got Louis and Frederick and Elsa and William and all these great German names, and then you have Zeke. I don't think so. I just know there's no child named Zeke. And so, I mean, there's absolutely no record of this, but the story has been around for so long and it just keeps getting told and retold. And it doesn't matter how many times you beat your head against the wall to try to convince people. I'll tell everybody if I do a presentation on the Limps, if you remember only one thing of this entire thing I've told you tonight, of all of these deaths that took place and all this other stuff, just please know there was no monkey boy. And that's all I ask. And I run into the same thing with stuff here, like the Mineral Springs. I mean, no, there's no little girl that drowned in there. There's no guy whose wife knocked him into the pool and drowned. None of that stuff happened. None of that's real. I mean, we have records. I mean, in the 70s, early 80s, you could get away with that kind of stuff, and I'll also give them some credit too, is that, when that place sat empty for years and a guy developed it in 1978 and reopened it, and people who would come in and have some weird experience, it's human nature to try to explain your experience, right? I mean, that's the way it works. And so it was easy for people to go, well, I'll bet that there was, for instance, woman that haunts the staircase there, the Jasmine Lady. And there's been all these stories and encounters that people have had that don't know the history of the building, don't know anything about it, and yet have experienced something around that staircase, whether it's footsteps or the smell of jasmine perfume or whatever, and don't have an explanation for it. Why are people having an experience? Well, I'll bet somebody fell down the stairs and died. Well, that's easy to think. It's a marble staircase. If you fell on that thing, it would hurt and you'd probably die. And so that seemed like a good explanation, but yet stuff takes on a life of its own. And once it's told, like any other urban myth, urban legend, folk story, once it's told and retold, everybody has to add their own little piece to it. And the story starts to grow. And soon you've got this long story about a woman who came there with her husband, and they were, came in to take in the waters and, during its heyday. And so, he, caught her cheating on him with another guest in the hotel room. And there was all these variations. And either he chased her out of the room and she fell down the stairs and died, or he pushed her down the stairs, and then he went back to the room and hung himself. I mean, there is just so many additions to this story, none of which are true. Not a single one.
That's so
no one
common.
ever died on those stairs, ever. I mean, no one ever died there. And so you're like, there's
maybe
no truth
something
to this.
traumatic happened, like almost like maybe somebody got like a really bad wedgie on the stairs.
Well,
you know what
I did
mean?
actually, the thing about it, and why the stairs, I don't know, but I actually did have kind of an answer to that story as to where this was coming from, because I actually had a guy whose aunt had committed suicide in the building, for real. I mean, it's documented. She had overdosed purposely in a room on the second floor, and had died there. And he came to us because he wanted to see the place. Now, this has happened in 1965. And so now he's, in 2015, he has now grown up. His aunt had lived next door to him. He spent every afternoon with her when he was a little kid. And she wore this perfume that his mother hated. This flowery jasmine perfume. Now, this guy told me the story. I did not bring up ghosts. He didn't know anything about the history of the place. He lived out of the area now. He grew up here, but moved away when he was a teenager. And he happened to be back in the area visiting and wanted to see where she died. And so I took him to let her see it. And, he told me his stories, and I told him what I knew about her death, just in the newspapers, and then he told me what he knew, and he's the one who told me about the perfume. I didn't lead him into it or anything. And suddenly, now the story made sense. And for me, when a story starts to make sense, that's what I get excited about. It's not, just all these myths about, a woman fell down the stairs and all that kind of stuff. I want something substantial that I can hang a story on, and now I had one. And so that made it a little more real for me. And then I could dismiss all the other nonsense. But,
That's wild. I mean,
yeah.
I grew up somewhat in a haunted house for a little bit. So my Uncle Dwayne, who you've met.
I love Uncle D.
He once had the world's largest Smurf collection.
Oh, no kidding.
He lost it in a divorce. Like, the man is an eccentric.
Right.
So in this house, the
Who takes away a man's Smurf collection?
Just to hurt him,
That is really petty.
No. He had to sell it.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
like,
I
she
thought she
wasn't
was-
like, give me them Smurfs.
Oh, that's how
I thought she
No,
wanted
no.
half the collection
No.
or something.
Beanie
Okay,
Baby
all right.
picture, thing
yeah.
kind of thing.
No. So anyway, like there's a weird ghost in this house, like up in the Smurf room. Dwayne would be like, yeah, well, man, the ghost is a prostitute, a woman that Abraham Lincoln killed.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
exactly.
hold on, Dwayne, what the fuck did you just say?
Yeah.
And he's like, she killed him with a butter knife, or he killed her with a butter knife and hid her under the cistern outside. And I'm like, well, this man's bonkers. How'd you figure this out? And he's like, oh, we had a psychic in here.
Yeah, exactly.
The psychic.
Yeah.
And then what's weird, though, is they found the cistern right where she said it would be. And I'm like, Well, it seemed like a good place for a sister.
A
and it's an
broken
old
clock
house.
is right twice a day.
So, because he sold the house, he wants to go trespass there in the night and dig it up.
Yeah.
And he's all like, I'm going to find that prostitute that Lincoln killed.
Okay.
Honestly, I'm down to help him with this.
Oh, yeah,
adventure.
no.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm all about
Yeah.
digging it up to see if there's a skeleton in there. Now, whether or not I'm going to, the Abraham Lincoln killed with a butter knife thing, I'm going to leave that alone. But as far as just digging up a cistern, that sounds kind of fun. So,
Yeah.
why not?
He gets into adventures like that. So, do you believe in any of the hauntings around Alton? Like any of them that you can be like 100% that is a real haunting, that's a real story?
When I had something I could put together with that story, it became a lot more believable for me. I am not a psychic. Obviously, I'm sitting around laughing about psychics. And I don't talk to dead people. I didn't get into this business because I had some experience I couldn't explain. I did it because I've always loved it. And, I had a great grandfather who filled my head full of ghost stories and crime stories, and it kind of set me in the path that I ended up on. But so when it comes to some of the things around Alton, I think there are some legitimate stories. I think there's a lot of folklore. That's part of growing up and living around an old river town. You're gonna get these stories. I used to hear about, the old cracker factory. I had a friend who had an antique store in the basement, and when she and her husband came there, they were not from here. They came here. They'd moved into that spot because they wanted to put it in an antique store. This is before it was all fixed up. And she used to tell me about how they would hear, they had a lot of odd things that happened, but the one thing that she used to talk about the most was that they used to hear somebody whistling in there all the time and somebody coming down the stairs. Now, unbeknownst to them, is the man who'd owned the place before him, who had died years before, used to go around whistling all the time. Now, there was no way they could know this.
Holy shit. No.
So that made the story really interesting.
I catered my friend's wedding years ago, right? And that is where I had to cook the food.
Oh, okay.
Because that's where they were staying, is they rented out the cracker factory.
Sure, right.
But I kept on thinking they were coming because I heard somebody on the stairs all the time. Yeah. And Psycho was like, there's no one coming. I was like, I swear to gosh, there's somebody out there, like 3 times. So that is crazy.
Whistling?
No, it wasn't I don't recall it being whistling. It was just like, it was like somebody was coming up the stairs, like noise. So that's crazy that you say that. That is nuts.
So,
okay.
There are odd little things that do come up, and they at least make you think. If they don't go, oh my God, I'm now an absolute believer. The only place that I really just outright dismissed, that I changed my mind about, is it's not in Alton, but it's in Grafton, and that's the Ruble Hotel. I never took that seriously from the time they reopened it in like 97 or whenever it was, 97, 98. When they reopened that thing, the first thing they started talking about was how they had a resident ghost, and I thought, sure you do. That's a great way to get customers to your little hotel,
Everyone
right? It's John Cusack in 1408. He goes to these little hotels, right? So that's exactly what I'm thinking about this. And but I actually did stay there. It's been a few years ago now, but and I never really thought the place was haunted. But at about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was there and staying and with a friend, and we both woke up separately, not realizing the other one was awake, because we heard a child crying in the hallway out in the room. And we never for a second thought that it was anything other than some family traveling, had a little kid with them, and now, they're stuck with this crying child, right? And what do? You're in a hotel. You cannot make a child stop crying, And so never thought another thing about it until the next day when I was talking to the owner at the time. And I said something about, do you get a lot of kids here? This doesn't seem like a kid kind of place. It's not that kind of hotel. And he said, well, not really. We don't get a lot. And why? And I said, well, because there was a kid crying in the middle of the night. And, I'll spare you the drawn out story I tell on my tour about this, but there was no one else in the building that night. We were the only ones staying there. That convinced me that there's something going on at the Ruble Hotel. Now, are all the stories true? I don't know. There are a lot of stories, but at least it convinced me that there could be a child there who is disturbing the guests because it disturbed
And
me.
is that something that people say reported
Yeah,
a child?
yeah.
Okay, I don't know
the
much
the
about
child,
that.
yeah. The ghost is they nicknamed her Abigail. I mean, they gave her a name and everything, which is again, I kind of went, okay, brother.
I like that. It's whimsical. Abigail's a very whimsical ghost name.
But they talked about even before they opened, the contractors who were there kept saying that things would disappear, the standard stuff. But they talked about spotting this little girl in a white nightgown many, many times. And often talked about how, they would see her. And then after they open, the staff and guests claim they would see her on the stairs, or they'd see her in the hallway up on the second floor and that kind of thing. And so, but I never really, people would ask me, hey, is there any place haunted we can stay? And I said, well, go to the Ruble Hotel. They talk about their ghosts. I don't know if it's true, and that went on for years and years until I finally stayed there and then had a weird experience. Like, I can't explain it any other way. He wasn't pulling my leg. There really wasn't anybody else in the building. We just didn't know it at the time.
You don't think they would play a recording?
Yeah,
I don't think
that's
so.
what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, when I stayed there, they had no idea who'd made the reservation or anything. So it wasn't like it was set up for me, you know what I mean, to get me to talk about it. It was a fluke. I mean, he was as surprised as I was by what had happened. So I don't think it was a setup. I think I would have kind of figured that one out. But so, I mean, every once in a while, this stuff there turns out to be, it's just that usually I find that the story that is told to explain it has nothing to do with reality, but that's the story that we've heard for so long. I mean, the Pius Albert story.
Well,
I mean, there's a perfect
John
example.
Russell.
Yeah, never happened. I mean, none of that stuff happened. He made the whole thing up but admitted it. He was being playful. The guy was just having a good time. He was printing a story for fun.
He's just riffing.
Yeah, he thought people would get a kick out of it. So he starts borrowing the name of a creek and that has nothing to do with the bird that devours men. That's not a real thing.
No, it translates to the little people of the forest.
Yeah, well, it also translates to water monster, a water panther.
Oh, that's
rather.
Mishy Pishow.
Yeah, so it's like all this stuff is like, these stories have been around forever and people will swear that that's what really happened, and it's not, but it doesn't mean that the magic and wonder is not there. It's just that we have to look in a different place to find it. And which is, for me, I choose history. I much rather tell a story about, something I've managed to track down the history of, or at least there's some kind of history backing it up. Because I always tell people, they're like, well, how do you prove that ghosts exist? And I said, well, you can't. Well, not through science anyway. All the gadgets and all the gizmos and the TV shows and the cameras and none of that stuff is ever going to prove a thing. It's interesting, I guess. I mean, if you're into that, it's not really my thing. But I mean, all the gadgets and stuff, but I get it. I get why people want that substance, but I always tell them, you're never going to prove, science is never going to accept the fact that ghosts are out there. They're just not. Because you cannot get a ghost to perform on command. And when it comes to science, the only way to prove something is for it to be repeatable. Well, that's not going to happen, with a ghost. It's not going to work that way. But you can prove that a place is haunted using the history. Now, bear with me because this is my example.
I dig it.
I had a woman, and this has been a long time ago, but it's kind of what really got me on the history bug part of it. She had her house that she said was haunted, and she asked me to come over. She wanted to tell me about it, and so I did. And she was telling me about how this man that she would see, her and her husband, her whole family would see this man, and he would normally show up in their bedroom. And he would always stand in one corner and he would kind of be there and he would look around. And I mean, she described him to a T, right, about what this guy looks like. And, but I thought, well, how do we prove this? I mean, there's no way to do it. But I thought, well, you know what? Before I do anything else, I'm going to go see what I can find out about this house. Now, this was back pre-internet days. So when you went down to the library to look something up, you were on the microfiche and all this stuff. And so I started with the city records, and I went backward, and I found all the names that were attached to the house. And then when they change, then you go, it's a long drawn out process back.
Court
Yes.
researches.
Properties. That's what I do for a living.
Yeah. So you've got to find all this stuff. And so you got to find the dates. Well, what I found out was that the guy who built this house had worked at a bank in town. And this was in Decatur, Illinois, where I grew up. Not at all.
I used to live there.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well,
No,
you
I
left.
know.
You
Only for a
left,
little
so
bit,
I
only
don't have
for a
to
couple
apologize
years.
anymore.
When a
So,
town still has former home of the Chicago Bears,
I know. Well, that's the claim. That's the only claim to fame Decatur
exactly.
has. So
It says
you
a lot.
kind of got to roll with that. But Decatur Staleys. Anyway, so I went back through all the history of the house, and I found out this guy worked at the bank, and he had embezzled a bunch of money.
Oh.
And had scheduled an audit because they realized this money was missing. Well, he knew he was going to get caught, so he took his own life. Now, the money never turned up. I still like to think it's in that house somewhere, but I don't. I know. But so anyway, I found photographs of the guy, found photographs from the era, and I took them back to, this is the good thing about having a grandpa who's a cop. I took a photo lineup back to this woman, and I said, well, I found out some things about your house, but I wanted to ask you first, before I tell you anything, do any of these guys look familiar? And she immediately points to the former owner of the house and said, that's the guy that we see in the bedroom. Now, there's no way she could have known this. She didn't know anything about it. It was a lot of work to do all this research. She'd never done it. And she pointed out the guy that was the ghost who turned out to be the former owner of the house who had committed suicide. Now, I went on from there, and I contacted some of the other people who lived in the house who also talked about it being haunted. They all picked out the same guy. Now, when you're looking at history and you're looking for proof, to me, historically speaking, that proves that house is haunted. These people did not know each other. They could not have compared notes. They had no idea the history of the place, didn't know who owned it before, didn't know what he looked like, but they all picked him out and said, that's the guy that we see. Historically speaking, that house is haunted. And so it's history that is the most compelling thing to me. And so when I hear a ghost story, I'll take it for what it is, but I take it all with a grain of salt until I can do some research on it.
Hell yeah. So my favorite Alton ghost story is, I think it burnt down, but it was like a convent where a guy who lived through
Tom Boothby.
Yeah, Tom Boothby.
Yeah, the Tom Boothby story.
Yeah, I heard that from Charlotte Johnson, I believe,
Yeah.
who was doing the parade grand marshal. It was her favorite. So you're familiar with it.
Oh, yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, and I dug into a lot of history on that building, too. It was the Mansion House, and it got its name because it was an early hotel. Well, not a hotel, a rooming house. And he named it the Mansion House, apparently because, and there have been a lot of other Mansion House hotels, but there was a really famous one in London, and that's where he got the name. This guy was a retired riverboat guy, and he'd opened it up with the idea, and he was a bit eccentric, and with the idea that he would lure in people from the riverboats. He was also a part of the Abolitionist Society in town, good friend of Elijah Lovejoy's. In fact, on the night that Lovejoy was killed, his first stop had been at the Mansion House that night on his way down. He used to meet with some of the other guys, some of the guys from Jacksonville that used to come down that were all part of the Underground Railroad movement. They would all meet at the Mansion House. And he was so wrecked by Lovejoy's death that he closed the rooming house for several years before he reopened it again.
Wow.
And it was during that time when Tom Boothby, that's the story, that's when he stayed there. Now, the whole Tom Boothby thing, the one-eyed, one-armed, grizzled Indian fighter, all of that may be just folklore.
Okay.
But it's a great story, and there is a point to it because the story, the way I look at it is these stories get started for a reason, and that's an old one. And that's a story that got started because he would awaken people at night with his screaming. that he was being haunted by the ghosts of Native Americans he'd killed during the War of 1812. That is supposedly the story. And he would wake up the whole house. And one night he woke up the whole house, and then nobody could get him to answer his door in the days that followed. And finally, the landlord opened it up, went inside, and found that he had died during the night. And that, the ghosts that were after him had finally gotten to him. That's always been the story. And then it did become a convent. First it became a convent, then it became a hospital. Briefly, it was the first hospital in Alton, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
And they treated some of the civilian people who worked at the penitentiary there during the smallpox epidemic in 1863. And then they moved out and turned it into, and opened St. Clair's, St. Joseph, St. Clair's Hospital. But then that place became a girls' school for years. And then it sold, and it became an apartment building. And so I knew the guy that used to own it, and he told me that he would still get tenants who would talk about hearing crying at night in the house. That, there's something to the story, right? Whether or not this, again, go back to, is the source a true story? There's no way to know. There's no record of who stayed there during the time it was a rooming house. So I don't know if Tom Boothby was real, but the newspaper stories go back to the 1870s. I found stories that go back that far about Tom Boothby and being the ghost that haunts that building. Before it burned down, one year, I was living here in Alton, and I did a couple of years at Fright Fest in October out at Six Flags. And they had asked me to come out and tell ghost stories, which is, as it turned out, a small version of hell to do that. It was great to get into the park for free and to get to ride the rides during Fright Fest. But they put me in Miss Kitty's saloon, well, whatever it is now, I don't know. But it also happened to be the building where they cooked the turkey legs.
Oh.
Which sounds great. And it was great the first weekend. But then the smell of it, after a while, I don't think I've eaten one since. And this was like 2001. So been a long time. Anyway, so I would do, 25, 30 minutes of ghost stories every other hour, which is a nightmare. I don't know how people do this. I don't know how people do like Broadway and do the same thing every night. I don't know. But I also found out the mentality of the people who would stand in line for things. They would get in line, like as soon as the last one ended, they'd get in line and stand there for an hour to wait for the next show, and then get up to the door and go, "No, what is it we're here for?" Dude, you've been standing in line for an hour. You don't know why you're here. Anyway, I had this couple who came up to me and said, "Oh, we saw you were from Alton." And I said, "Yeah, and we just moved to Alton, and but we think our house is haunted." And I said, "Oh, really?" And they said, "Yeah, we just moved into an apartment building, and we had a whole bunch of nights really late. We kept hearing somebody crying and screaming, and we were trying to find out who it was, and it was nobody in any of the apartments." And I said, "Where do you live?" And they said, "What's on State Street?" And I said, "Is it called the Mansion House?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Boy, do I have a story for you." So I don't know. I assume they continue to live there. I don't know, but unfortunately, it's
if you are that
gone
person,
now.
why don't you hit us up? If you were that person, that story, I want to.
Yeah,
know.
I would love to hear. I'd love to hear
know.
from you again. I really would, because I don't know whatever became of them.
We do have to take our first
yes,
break.
okay. Yes, we do.
We'll be right back. I don't know if you've checked out Drag the River yet. It's pretty cool. You can leave us a voicemail. Go to sunkenpresspodcast.com and you click on Drag the River, or you just put in a little / Drag the River in the little address bar, and it takes you to this weird little thing where you can record a voicemail about anything. You can record 90 seconds at a time, and that's enough. If you got more than 90 seconds worth of shit, leave a second voicemail. Yeah, we'll listen to them. We'll listen to all of them, and we might transcribe them anonymously and post them for people, just leave us weird voicemails on Drag the River. It's a cool feature. Not enough of you have used it. I used it to leave a weather report after I ate too many edibles. All right, so we're back. So Well, recently, I understand that you took over ghost stories at the Mineral Springs, and then there were no ghost stories at the Mineral Springs.
Yeah, I've actually been or had been at the Mineral Springs for, gosh, pretty close, about 10 years or so. I mean, I've been doing things there since the 90s, but I moved into a space in the Mineral Springs about 10 years ago. So we had a place for our dinner events, because that's kind of one of the things that I do is in addition to like tours and the ghost hunts and things, I do a lot of speaking events where people come, they have dinner, and then there's a variety of topics that I do presentations on. And so I've been there for quite a while. And then I took over the old torture museum that used to be there.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I did
love
not
that
keep the
place.
torture stuff.
Oh, no.
No, I did not. That really wasn't my thing. Most of the torture stuff ended up, well, let's just say if you visit any commercial haunted houses anywhere in the St. Louis area and you see torture things, it probably came from me. So I got rid. I kind of shuffled all that stuff out.
Repurpose it.
I mean, I had a huge collection of my own stuff. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. And so I've picked up a lot of weird things over the years. And so I finally had a place to display it. So I kind of got all that stuff opened up and turned it into the American Oddities Museum. So we've been there for about 2 years, but we did ghost hunts there, usually a couple times a month. We had groups in. It was a good part of our business. I mean, pretty solid. And then, we got new landlords, and we were not, even with a $3 million insurance policy, we're no longer allowed to do ghost hunts. So, it took a bite out of us. So, but yeah, we'll be moving the museum out of there in a couple of weeks.
Where's
and
it
we're
going?
moving downtown to the old Snyder building. Next to Frew's Bridal, the building with the tower on the front of it. We're moving in there. We start moving on the 15th, or we take over the building on the 15th. We'll start moving on the 20th, and then I've got about a month to get it all back together again. So it'll be fun. I mean, not the packing. Packing is not fun. The move isn't really that fun.
No.
The unpacking is fun.
Yes.
And figuring out where it's all going to go. That part I like. So yeah, that'll keep me busy for the holidays.
So do you get the turret?
Not really. I mean, we have access to the turret, but we will not be using it for the museum.
Okay.
It's kind of, we'll be on the bottom 2 levels. And
Gotcha.
that's
But you
really
could put some
kind of
fake
next.
ghosts in there.
Well, we could do something for
Like-
sure. We're
Could you
working
house
on
a
all
town
that.
hermit up there?
Yeah. It just sits in the window and stares out at people.
Yes.
I'm thinking maybe a doll that sits in a rocking chair, like Robert the doll from Key West, and we'll put it
Yes.
in the window. And
How many spooky dolls are there?
I got quite a few, including one that is genuinely spooky, who genuinely does his own thing.
So you have a haunted doll.
I do have a haunted doll. Not like he doesn't kill people and stuff. It's not.
Has he ever burnt down a plantation?
No, nothing.
Tell him
like
to up
that.
his game. We need to get the
Yeah,
numbers
well,
up.
yeah. I don't need him to be burning anything. He does misbehave. I mean,
Okay.
he does move around on his. Well, when I first got him, he would kind of move around on his own, and
Like
that
how
was
so?
weird. Well, I was given to him. I mean, this doll came from a family estate, and when it was purchased, according to the friend who had gotten it, and the aunt and uncle who had this doll, and all the nieces and nephews of the people who'd owned it originally, used to talk about how creepy it was, and that he used to sit in the house, and that he had a connection to a couple of children that this family had, that he had this doll made for his little sister, and his name was Sam. And so we named the doll after him. And the doll was actually made, the clothing of the doll was made from his own clothing. And he'd had it made for his sister because he was going away and wanted his sister, as kind of, you can play with Sam and, and then I'll see you when I get back kind of thing. But everybody died. So, so the
wait.
parents kept the doll because it was the little girl's doll who had died and the brother who
How did
had
they
it made.
die?
Well, he died during World War I. The sister died from influenza later on. And so they kept this doll, but according to the people who, after they passed away, that were running the estate sale, they always talked about how this doll always gave them the creeps, and the doll would, just very unnerving. And according to their aunt, this doll would move around and stuff like that. So it freaked everybody out. So of course, my friend thinks, oh, this is perfect. I know just who needs this doll. Anyway, so while I was trying to get the museum organized, he's in his own case with the other haunted, or allegedly haunted objects in the case. And I never really thought a thing about it, except for the fact that I would come in the morning and I'd find him in different positions. But I thought, he's heavy. His head's heavy. He's just fallen over, right? So I got one of those metal stands for him that you could clamp on dolls so he doesn't fall over. And I would come in and he'd be like turned in different directions. So now I'm thinking, okay, somebody's pranking me. It's got to be that. Because I wasn't the only one that could get in there. I was just the only one doing any work. And I thought, well, they're just coming in to have fun with me. And they thought it'd be funny. And so I thought, well, I'll just check the camera because we got a ring camera on the entrance so I can see coming and going. And there's nobody coming in or out but me. So I finally put the doll, I put him in his own case, his own
like
little
Annabelle.
case all by himself. I mean, not with any death warnings or anything like that. I just thought, well, maybe he needs his own spot. So I put him in his own place, in kind of a place of honor with a little light on him and a little sign that tells his story and everything. And for the most part, he's pretty good and lets you take him somewhere. And then when we take him places, that's when odd things. I took him over in October because I like to take things around, and I was going to write to the Writers Guild, St. Louis Writers Guild, to do a presentation. They wanted me to talk about my career, and I thought, which career would you like me to talk about? No matter how it looks, you have to do like 30 things if you're a writer and you want to eat. If you're not Stephen King. So I have this museum, I have these tours. So I took him with me. And as soon as I started talking about the museum and I started talking about Sam, the guy who's running the AV, because they have a lot of people who are watching it online, and we had a group that was there in the room too. And the guy that's doing the AV with the cameras and stuff, as soon as I started, he's like, and he's acting really weird. And he gets up and he moves away from his equipment. He moves like 3 rows back. And I go, what this guy, And so we get done with it, and I'm talking to people and stuff, and he comes up and he says, listen, I need to tell you this. The reason I got up and moved is because as soon as you started talking about Sam, the cord that I plugged in that has this little spotlight on it, he says, as soon as I started to talk, the cord started moving back and forth on its own and whipping back and forth. And he said, I don't want any part of that. And got up and moved. So, yeah, I don't know. I didn't see it, but that's what he claimed. So anyway, people come in all the time and they want to hear about him. And the only thing I've really seen recently that's been weird. And listen, I like to get him out just to freak people out. I'll get him out, bring him to things. People go, oh, can I take his picture? And we'll be like, I don't know. You're going to have to ask him, ask Sam.
My kids love that.
But I would get him out like I do like they'll do a St. Louis show me kind of thing at the beginning of, in the news breaks in the mornings. And usually at Halloween, Tim Frizzell used to come over every Halloween and we'd end up doing something. And he just really freaked out about that. I didn't want it anywhere near me, anywhere near him. So I'd be standing there holding it like a toddler, and he's like out of the frame because he doesn't want to be close to the doll. Anyway, so we would do all kinds of things like that. And so I had gotten a call from this production company, and they said, hey, listen, we're going to be doing a ghost hunt. We're going to be coming to Alton, and we wanted to do some ghost hunts. So I got them set up with a couple of places where they could bring their TV show. I don't know who these guys are, never heard of them. It's on Canadian TV, right? Mm-hmm. And so
Canadian shows are actually kind of cool, though.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's probably, when the guys show up, they're really nice. I mean, so I just didn't know who they were. And so they came to the museum and they wanted, listen, you've really helped us out. We want to feature this in the show. And so, show us some of this stuff that's supposed to be haunted. And so I gave them a little tour of the museum, and I got some of the things out that people have told me ghost stories about that I haven't experienced. And so we put them all out on a table, and they said, well, could we use all of our gadgets and things and our recorders and stuff? And can we set it all up and see what happens when it's around these haunted things? And I'm like, yeah, sure, we can do that. So I didn't really think about Sam because he's in another part of the museum. And so they're dicking around with all their stuff, and they've got all these little lights, that motion sensors and all these things, and nothing's happening, and all. And I thought, oh, well, you know what? As nothing's happening, I thought, oh, I guess I should get Sam out and maybe, and see what happens. So I open up his case and I get him out and I carry him over there and I put him on the table. And then I just walked away to get out of the way so they could do their thing. As soon as even though I know I told you that I'm not really into all the gadgets and stuff, this is weird. As soon as I walked away, all of the gadgets, all the motion sensors, the, EMF detectors, everything they've got, all goes off. As soon as I put Sam down and walked away.
Nothing else went off with it?
Nothing else triggered anything until I put Sam down. But then everything went off. And it stayed that way for like the next 15 minutes. Now, these guys are freaking out because they're like, oh, I've never seen this happen before. It's nothing like this, just doesn't happen. And they on and on and on about how exciting it was and everything. And so after like 10, 15 minutes of this, they're like, okay, well, there was only so much footage. You can have the same thing. So I came over to start kind of putting things away, and I picked up Sam. And as soon as I picked him up, it all turned off. When we were done, one of the cameramen came up to me and he says, talking about how weird that was. And he says, I've been with these guys for a while and I'd never seen that happen before. He said, but it's funny that when you left the doll, everything went off. And then when you came and picked the doll up again, it all stopped. It was like he thought you abandoned him on that table. Like a kid that I left him. He threw a little tantrum because I'd left him there. And then when I came back to get him, it stopped. So either this doll is going to start like showing up like in our bedroom at night or something and hanging out. And so, or something like that, it would not be a good thing. I don't know what to think of, but this doll,
and she was just like, no, don't do it.
I don't know if he's really attached to me or if it was just a fluke, but anyway, he's kind of weird, it's kind of a weird little deal.
What do you think causes that?
I don't know. I don't know. You could get very fanciful with this thing and say, oh, well, it's the spirit of the little girls attached to it or brothers attached to it, or they both are. Or you could just say it's just a weird little bit of energy that nobody can really explain. You hear about things like that, about things getting attached to objects and items and things. And maybe that's all this is. That's my best guess on that one.
What's the weirdest thing that you've experienced that you cannot explain?
Probably, in 33 years that I've been doing this stuff, as a job, I've only ever seen 2 ghosts.
Okay.
And I've been to literally hundreds, and I mean that, and I'm using literally correctly here. I've been all over the country to places, the scariest places you can imagine, where absolutely nothing happens. Alcatraz, Eastern State Penitentiary. You name it, I've been there. Okay. Yeah. So, but only twice have I ever seen a ghost. Once was at a place where you would expect it, which was an abandoned tuberculosis sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky, Waverly Hills.
Okay,
I've heard about that
famous place. I was there with a friend. This was back early 2000s, before they had opened it up to the public, but they were working on it, getting ready to. And I was down there for a convention, And he says, man, he got me to come down a night early. Got to take you to this place. It's so cool. Yeah, you really, it's going to blow you away. And it is a really cool building. But we were just walking around, just goofing around in there and just kind of walking around, seeing different parts of the building. They were just starting to kind of clean it up, but they had a lot of break-ins, as you might imagine. Vandals and things have been broken in over the years. So we're just walking down a hallway, and all of a sudden, this guy just walks across the hall in front of us, out of one doorway into the doorway on the opposite side of the room, or of the hall, and which was startling, as you might imagine. But we just assumed it was somebody who'd broken in. And so we thought, well, we got to tell this guy's got to get out of here. So we walk into the room where he went into, and, with the, hey, buddy kind of thing. And we walk in, and the room is empty, and there's no way out of the room. I mean, it is a dead end. So that was startling. The other time was even less, even seems less exciting to that, but still weird. It happened at a movie theater that I briefly owned. A friend of mine owned it or was going to own it, and I stepped in to help him before he could get it together. Mm-hmm. And so I owned the theater for a short amount of time, and I was involved with it.
Where was the
20
theater?
Some years. Indicator.
Okay.
It was the Avon Theater.
Okay. Yeah. That place is haunted.
Yeah, it is. And so I knew about the history of the place. I've been writing about it already. By that time, I'd been writing about it for years. So I knew that it was supposed to be haunted by the ghost of one of the original owners. So really not the first owner, but the guy who'd really got it up and running and kept it running. And he was there for like 40 years and had died in the 60s, before I was born, had died. But I knew about him. I knew his story and things, but I'd never had any experiences there. I used to hear about all the people that had, but nothing had ever happened to me. But one afternoon, I was sitting in the office, just minding my own business, talking to a friend of mine on the phone, and I heard somebody come down the hallway, and I assumed it was the projectionist. This was pre-digital. I assumed it was the projectionist coming in because he and I were usually the only ones ever in there in the afternoon. And so I looked up expecting him to stop in to say hi, and instead, this man walked into the doorway of the room, and he stood there for a minute, and he looked around, not at me, but just sort of looked around, and then he turned around and left. Well, I say some man, but I knew exactly who it was. It was Gus Constantopoulos. He was that original owner who'd been there for 40
Greek
years.
Too?
He was Greek. He and his brothers owned several businesses and theaters in town. And it was Gus standing in the doorway, who had been dead by that time, like 50 years, whatever. But he looked around, turned around, walked away. Well, I got up to see where he went, and the hallway was empty and nobody there. So that was weird. That was startling because I never expected it. And as far as I know, I've never seen a ghost since. But
so both times though, it didn't look like the apparitions.
That's what I was just about to say. It wasn't like some shadowy figure, some, ghostly figure at a sheet rattling a chain. They looked completely solid both times. They looked as real as any of us sitting here I'm looking at right now. And so it makes me wonder. So I say I've seen two ghosts. What if I've seen more and I don't know it? What if we all do? What if we see them more often than we think we do? It's just that they don't look like, how would we know? They don't look like ghosts. They just look like people.
In the Let Mansion, have you stayed there?
Oh gosh, yeah. I stayed there lots and lots of times. And I've had a couple of times I've been there. One time a buddy of mine and we swore we heard glass shattering downstairs in one of the dining rooms, and we thought, oh no, somebody's left something on the side of a table or something, and we were the last people there. Went down, nothing out of place. I've heard footsteps on the staircase there, but again, that's one of those real kind of, did I hear it? Did I not hear it? Did I imagine it because I'm stoked to hear something?
And I think that's what it is.
I think a lot of times that is a big part of it. A lot of experience.
Is it Elsa's or what the one with the floorboard that people can leave their experiences?
Oh yeah,
what room I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's the lavender room, and they call it that, but that was actually the master bedroom. That was William and Julia's room. And it's funny how they named all this
They
stuff.
did
And
name,
The
yeah.
Lavender Lady never lived in that house. So anytime anybody says they've seen her ghost there, I'm like, why?
We
Because
didn't see
she
any-
like visited here because you lived down the street with her husband and they were only married for a couple of years. So she never spent any time here. So you're not seeing her ghost here. I'm sorry, you're just not. But yeah, so I don't know. Those were weird because I just never expected it. You know, you go to things and you think, oh God, this place is so haunted, something's going to happen, and nothing does. As you go into it expecting it, forget it. You know, it's,
My ex
at least for
said
me.
that he thought that in the middle of the night the ghost like stole his wallet, but I was like, that thing had not. He broke boy had nothing in there. That ghost got nothing.
Yeah,
But I do
so
not
it was
think
an
that this
empty
ghost-
wallet. Yeah,
but I also don't think I was like ghosts don't care about.
Yeah, why would
money.
they steal
why
a wallet?
Would they need
Yeah,
to
I don't know.
get-
That's a good question.
What was the most disappointing haunted location?
Oh gosh. Well, disappointing in that the ghost story is a crock, but cool place
Okay.
would be the Winchester Mansion in San Jose.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's the coolest place. It's so cool. And I was just talking about this with somebody the other night that, you know, it has turned into this thing where this woman was crazy and she was trying to keep the ghosts away. And as long as she kept building around the clock,
like the
the
movie.
ghosts would never. Yeah, the movie's fun. And the story's been around for a long time. But that story was not around when she was alive. I mean, people thought she was kind of nuts because she built this gigantic house with all these different levels and all the different kinds of staircases and all this kind of stuff. She was not a spiritualist. She did not believe that ghosts told her to build anything. That story was made up in the 30s by a guy who bought the house who was a former carnival barker. I mean, he was a sideshow guy. So he knew a good thing when he saw it and turned it into a haunted house.
So that story's been around since the 30s.
Yeah.
So is that where Stephen King got Rose Red?
That is where Rose Red
Okay.
came from. That's
That's one
what
of my
inspired
favorites,
it. Yeah,
Stephen
yeah. Oh, it
King.
was
Okay.
Sam and I talking about that because she asked me about Rose Red. The thing about it is
gonna gush.
that Sarah Winchester was a genius, just that no one would acknowledge it because she was a woman. And she wanted to be an architect, but was never allowed to study, never allowed to go to school. Instead, she, got married, came from a wealthy family, got married to a much wealthier family, and had this ungodly amount of money that she could spend. So she did. She took a farmhouse and she turned it into her playhouse. And she just kept building things because she could. She had the money to do
more
it.
like of a sad story than a
It
haunting.
is a sad story because, and she didn't live there alone. She lived there with her sister, and yes, she'd had several deaths in her family, and I'm sure that she was in mourning for a husband and a daughter that she loved very much. But she found a great place to build there in the valley outside San Francisco, and she had all this property and all this money, and she could do whatever she wanted to do, so she did. And she kept building this magnificent, crazy house. And she would tear things down and start over again because it didn't work out the way she wanted it to. And so, floors were removed. That's why there are staircases that go nowhere. It's not to confuse the ghosts. It's because there was another level there, but she took that one off and rebuilt. And so there's a really cool story behind it, but it's gotten lost in this
That's way cooler
crazy
than the
ghost story.
Yeah.
But yet they just keep that thing alive with it being a ghost story. And I'm not going to say that, a place can't become haunted or something. That's not my point. My point is, I'm not saying ghosts aren't real. I'm just saying that was something that turned out to be a disappointment because going there as a kid, I thought that story was absolutely true and did for years, but it's not. This was a woman who was, again, who should be celebrated as this genius woman who had these great ideas that she was never able to really do anything with except for her own structure, her own house, her own building. So in a way, it was disappointing when it comes to ghost stories, not disappointing when it came to a much cooler story, So if that makes sense.
It does. It
know.
makes me wonder what you think of Coral Castle, though.
Well, yeah.
So Coral Castle was built by that. I forgot where he immigrated from, but like he built it for this woman who never showed up.
Right.
And he was like 5 feet tall, and everyone was like, what's he doing out there? What's he building out there? And he's like, I use pyramid technology and I stack giant rocks.
Yeah, yeah. And I think he was having some fun with people is what he was doing.
Of course.
And building an interesting place. And it's at least we don't have there's not really a ghost story that goes along with it. But it's an interesting place, but how true is that story? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I don't know if it's true or if it's not true. And I think that a lot of that stuff is what it boils down to, is just that nobody could understand that. When it was going on in the 30s or the 40s, they didn't see that as something that there was not enough whimsy. You know what I'm saying? And I'm often accused by Sam of not having enough whimsy because I want to take apart all the stories.
Yeah.
But for me, that's what makes it fun. It's so much more interesting for me to find out the real story behind this stuff.
Relatable.
The Myrtle's plantation in Louisiana, same thing. It's this great story about how this woman who was this abused slave who poisons her entire master's family and all these things and none of it ever happened. She didn't even exist.
That sucks.
But it was
that's kind of cool if she did.
well,
Yeah.
but
Good for her.
but it's one of those places that I did a Netflix episode or show called Unexplained Files.
Oh.
And so it was like 6 episodes, and one of them is about the Myrtles. And they had specifically asked me to come down and do this because I had debunked that story. Because I had the records that showed the slave didn't exist, all these things, and nobody died from being poisoned. They died like a year apart from yellow fever, and had all these records. But they've been telling that story since the 50s because this woman had made it up to generate business, and it had taken on a life of its own. And it's like one of the most haunted houses in America kind of thing. So they had in the show, the first 15 minutes or so is like the staff there telling this story. And then they bring in the villain. So I'm the villain. He comes in and says, yeah, none of that's true. And
That's
so,
fun,
yeah, it was fun to do it, but they chose me to do it because I have a real problem with plantation tourism. Real problem with that.
Absolutely.
It's awful, and it makes me ill that they continue to do it. Some have gotten better, but it's still part of it. And this place this story's really bad. And so they chose me to do it because they wanted a white guy to come in and do it, to tell the story. Now, I did not know that's why they chose me until I got there and found out the director, the producer, and the entire crew were all African American. So they couldn't do it. They wanted me to do it. So I did it, and I was happy to do it. So I had a ball doing this. But it was one of those stories that I grew up with. This terrible, awful story that I'd always heard. And then you find out none of it's true. Now, could the house be haunted? Absolutely. There were 10 murders that took place in that house.
Oh, shit.
Documented murders that happened in that house. I've got the list. I've got all of the material on it. The records are all there. So could the house be haunted? Yeah. But why do we have to use a story that's not true to promote it? That's what bugs me. That's what bugs me. And, bringing things back around to Alton and us talking about Alton stories. The true stories are always so much better than anything that gets made up. And there are plenty of stories that have been made up. And I've been trying to, in the years that I've been doing this, and I've been in Alton since 97 and, back and forth. I didn't live here the entire time, but I've always had, the tours and the stuff here. But ever since that time, I've been spending my time trying to find the roots of these stories and find out, why did people say this place is haunted? How did this get started in the first place? Was it just somebody made it up, or did it get started for a reason? And that's what I've been trying to do all this time. I swear to God, it's the last one I'm going to tell you. I'm going to hit you with.
Then we'll come back for one last.
Okay.
You know, there's a little eye in the corner of some of our videos. It's because we went on a tangent, and they're great. But, you know, we had to cut them out for time. Missy's a great editor, and she compiles them for our Patreon viewers to view. And we need more of those fucking Patreon viewers, dog. We are independent local media, and we want you to give us money to do that. You know, like, you guys are pretty good about giving us money, but you could be better. We could all be better. You know, you give us more money, we do more shit. I don't know, maybe I wouldn't have a day job. Maybe I could be your news daddy all the time. Could you imagine just having me on call 24/7 to investigate whatever the fuck you want? I could be that for you. I could be your hero. All right, so we're back with Troy Taylor, and you have one last big story to tell us.
I do. It's not a big one.
Okay.
It was just a story of how sometimes the real story is even better. You know, you'll get a story that, you know, gets a surprise ending. That's what's fun. And I had been telling this story. We started doing a pub crawl this summer downtown because the bars were suffering for obvious reasons. And so we have, I knew a lot of people at bars down there, and we thought, well, I bet they'd like us to bring in like 50 people a night. So we were, and we were packing them in. And so we started doing this pub crawl, and I had a story that even though it wasn't on the pub crawl, it was associated with a building that was, it's a long story, next to a building kind of thing. But anyway, so I was telling a story about this guy who had worked downtown and had taken his own life back in 1912 in his house, and that the house got a reputation for being haunted for years after that. And so I had dug up a lot of stuff on it and found some of the stories that people had, you know, had told about things that had happened to them there. But, you know, I had no idea if there'd been anything current, because short of going up and knocking on the door and going, hey, is your house haunted? Which I don't do. I just kind of said, you know, I don't know if, you know, anything happened currently, but there aren't any more stories. I don't have any more records. So I'm telling this story one night, and I just finished, and we were just getting ready to go to Bossa Nova, and this lady in the back raises her hand, and I said, oh yeah. She says, I just have a question. Where did you say the house was located? And so I told her where it was again, and I told her exactly. And she goes, is it yellow? And I said, yeah. And she says, I live there. And it's haunted. So still haunted after all these years. She goes, I just never knew why it was haunted, but it is still haunted. She said, we still hear the footsteps, and it is sometimes a very sad place. She said, and now I know why. And I thought, that's the perfect ending to a story. That's all I need right there, is you just gave me my ending that I didn't know was coming. So I guess that's, like I said, it's kind of my thing around Alton or wherever, but Alton especially, since we live here, to take these stories and try to find the root of the story. You know, that's my favorite part of doing all of this stuff.
So what would you say is the most haunted place in Alton?
Well, I'd have to say, based on all the backstories and the current activity, I'd still have to say it's probably the Mineral Springs.
Okay.
I you know, you hear lots of stories about the McPike Mansion, you know, and while I think that a lot of the stories, you get a lot of psychic stuff mixed in there. But when you get some of the firsthand accounts of some of the activity, especially some of the ones that don't have anything to do with, say, current, that they're 50 years old, and you hear about a story there, you know, you could put some weight behind it. And, you know, there have been things that have happened with credible stories in that house. I think that its reputation grew because, well, it looks like a haunted house, you know, and it sat empty for so long, you know, and it became everybody's favorite haunted house. And I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not haunted, because I don't know that it's not. Based on some of the things, there's some activity there. I've spent the night in the house several times. I mean, it's an interesting place. But reputation-wise, definitely it's going to be pretty high on the list. I think the First Unitarian Church, not that we know currently, because I haven't been in there in a while, but I do also think that it had a lot of activity too, and had a real story behind it that no one was telling. The story behind it is the minister who committed suicide in the building. That's not normal.
No.
That's not normal. Churches don't normally have that.
No.
You know, they
That's like
would,
a big sin.
they would tell. They would tell. Well, the Unitarians are loose.
Well,
you
yeah,
know.
that's
I'm
true.
just kidding, but
I like that you described them as loose.
yeah,
Like-
well, you know, hey, they have kind of their live and let live
bunch of
attitude.
floozies.
I kind of, I dig that more than
I do
we
like
than
like
all
them.
the
We
strict
approve of
stuff,
them.
Yes.
you know. But they would tell stories about things that had happened, but nobody was really talking much about this minister who was a real guy who, you know, really did take his own life in the building. And there have been a lot of things. I mean, you know, I've spent a lot of time in that building over the years, inside at different times on tours. We've had a lot of things that we used to have happen on the tours. I can't really explain easily. People who would come in, they wouldn't even know the story, and we'd start to talk, and they'd start talking about seeing people walking behind us and all kinds of stuff. It's a weird place. I mean, I do think it's genuinely haunted. I think that Franklin Lodge is another place, that Masonic Lodge that's up in Upper Alton. It's had a lot of activity too, and I think there's something to it. Now, I need to dig deeper on that one as far as some of the history goes. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know all about the history. Now, friends that are belong to the lodge know a lot more about the history of it than I do. But I do know there is a lot of activity there as far as people telling stories that don't have any reason to make it up. You know, I mean, that doesn't suit them to make stories up about that place. But yet, you know, a lot of stuff happens. So I think as far as another place that is genuinely haunted, I would definitely put that on the list.
So why isn't Alton like the Halloween capital of the Midwest?
That is a really good question. I mean, as far as like supernatural paranormal tourism goes, we do okay. We don't have a lot of help, but we do okay.
What would help look like?
Well, help would be it being advertised as going beyond one of the most haunted small towns in America. I mean, that's the moniker we've been able to spread around the country. And the beauty of that is that started to come around the time that the internet kicked off. And that made it really easy to spread that word around. And I think that we owe a lot of the people coming to town. And listen, we get people from all over. We get people from all over the Midwest and all over the country. When we do our conference in June, I mean, you're talking 400 or 500 people, and 5 might come from local. You know, the rest of them come from all over the place, all over the state.
What festival is that?
We do the Haunted America Conference. This is our 29th year this year. We'll be back at Lewis and Clark College. We've outgrown everywhere else. And that's the only place we can hold everybody. And it's a good spot for it. You know, it's they work with us. They enjoy having us there. We enjoy doing it there. But we get people who come from, seriously, I mean, California, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, that come from all over to attend this thing because we've been doing it for so long. And so we do get people, but why, you know, we have this big Halloween parade. We do all these events at Halloween. I mean, we obviously amp everything up, but I guess the thing is maybe the reason I'm so like, you know, well, whatever kind of thing is because we do it all year round. You know, we have events throughout the entire year and we have stuff going on every weekend and people come and we usually fill up most of the events we do. So we have a lot of people who are coming, but why don't we have this massive Halloween thing? I mean, like Sleepy Hollow, you know, why don't we have that? That's a good question. It's beyond my budget and reach to make that happen.
That's fair.
Well, if Corey ever is
try.
mayor, if Corey becomes mayor one day,
Yeah. Then it'll be a whole different thing. You know,
My wife won't let me
I
be
forgot
mayor.
that was a thing
we
for a
get
little
support from we get support from the rivers and routes, but not that kind of support. I mean, they will lend us the support, but I need it to be. It doesn't have to be just us. It can just be Halloween. You know, but when you look at the fall guide,
we just need a Gotham power. That's what we need.
I
We need
guess
a good Gotham power.
I guess you know, you look at a fall tourism guide on the website, it looks great, but you look at the guide that goes out everywhere, and we're lucky if the tours are even mentioned, and it's October. You know, I get it. You don't want to put them in June. That's fine, but it's October, so we need more space. We need more space for that. You know, we need some help. And I guess I need to figure out who do I need to see? Let me talk to your manager. I don't know who the manager is that we need to talk to, but I wonder if it's maybe on a statewide level. I don't know.
Could
I
be.
really don't know.
Because I would love to see it. Like
I would too.
We should be the Salem of the Midwest.
It's a great parade and stuff. And we should have it, the whole month should be, you know, I mean, people go to New Orleans, not just for Mardi Gras, they go for Halloween.
I went there for Halloween for my honeymoon.
Even though there's no specific reason why, other than
it's spooky.
It's a very haunted place. But
Yeah.
I mean, we could use that ourselves. I mean, we can use that. And so I think that people should be coming here for Halloween.
Are you going to do the haunted bar tours next year too?
Oh yeah, we start them. We've already got them on our schedule. We start in April, and we'll be doing them weekends
What else you
again.
got going?
Yeah, we do dinner tours on a regular basis. I do 2 different ones. We do Ghosts of the River Road, which Bluff City does the dinner, and then we go up the River Road and we do ghost stories all along the way. And we do Grafton, and then we do one called Great River Hauntings, which leaves from Alton, goes up the River Road, and then we have dinner at Pere Marquette Lodge, also haunted. They've got all their ghost stories. We have dinner there, all the fried chicken you can eat, which is why it's my favorite tour. And then we do stuff in Grafton, and then we come back to Alton. And then we do our regular walking tours throughout the spring, summer, and fall. And then I started doing the pub crawls, and we're going to bring them back next year because it really worked out.
I went on one in New Orleans when it's for my birthday.
Yeah,
it was really fun.
Always fun. I just want to, show people a good time and give them some history, with the ghost stories to go along with it. Because the tours that we do are really, honestly, don't tell anybody. This is a secret. So no one tell. It's a history tour. Mm-hmm. It just has a ghost story at the end. Exactly.
That's all the best ones
making
are.
people learn against their will. I love it.
Exactly. And that's all I've ever done. I mean, I've had kids. Well, they were kids when like my first haunted Decatur book came out in 1995. I got a kid who he's not a kid anymore. I got a guy who works for me who does my tours in Decatur. Was 8 years old when my book came out. Oh, wow. And he never lets me forget that either. Thank you, Adam. But I get that a lot. People come up and go, I hate reading. I don't like books, but I love this. And now I know more about, this town or this particular thing than my parents do or that my teachers do because I read this book. I'm going to write these books whether people are reading them or not because you can't help it.
Where can you
have
find
to do it? Well, we always have our books in stock at the museum store.
Okay.
And then when we move to our new location, we'll be open Thursday through Sunday. So we're going to be open a little bit more. But, we've got a website. I mean, AmericanHauntings.net. You can go to AltonHauntings.com if you just wanted to stay local. That'll still get you to our bookstore. So the books are there. We ship things out.
Weird
Everything gets
Illinois is
autographed.
one of them.
Weird Illinois is no longer for sale. It is out of print.
Oh,
yeah. So if you find one, yes, absolutely. I do sign them. People do show up with them. But that book is 20 years old this year. This spring, it was 20 years old. That was the heyday of book publishing, I got to tell you. Back then.
It's really nice, and it's held up.
Yeah,
like it got a
Barnes
little bit
and Noble put out the original edition, and it was so great because they would like put you out on a tour. I mean, I would go I spent like 2 weeks on a book tour all over Chicago, signing at Barnes and Nobles. They paid for everything. No one does anything like that anymore. Those were the old days.
Oh, before I forget, now that you mentioned Chicago, I want to ask you about, so I'm from Chicago.
Okay.
My favorite ghost is from Chicago, and I want you to guess who.
Resurrection Mary.
Yes,
That is my favorite ghost story too.
Are you serious?
That is my favorite ghost story of all time.
The first time when I was a little girl, I watched the episode of Unsolved Mysteries. Where
Jerry Palis.
Yeah. And it was like, I love it. What is your take on it? Because
I
love the
cab
driver.
that is a handful. I mean, that is a lot to bite off. But I got interested in Resurrection Mary when I was like 11. Before she had really, there had been sightings, but I didn't know about them at the time. I got interested because of the record on the back of the Honeycomb cereal box that year. It had records that you could cut them off, and there was a Vanishing Hitchhiker story on one of them. And I listened to it over and over and over again. And then I got interested in, any kind of Vanishing Hitchhikers, but then Mary was the one who really got me hooked. And because the stories are so good, because there's so much history, but again, there are lots of versions of the story about how she got hit by a car and she went to the Willowbrook Ballroom and she was dancing and now she's a hitchhiker hitching rides. And there was a cab driver who picked her up, and there was Jerry Palis who picked up a woman at Liberty Grove Hall and wanted to ride home, and she disappeared at the gates to Resurrection Cemetery. All these stories, great stuff. Well, you start digging into the history, and there are a lot of different versions of the legend. But in real life, once you start really getting into the details, you find out that while she got popular in the 70s, late 70s, into the early 80s, that's when everybody started talking about her. Now, this story had already been around since the 30s, but not in the newspapers. It was a story that people were telling around the area because they knew of a girl who would hitch rides not to get to the cemetery, but to leave the cemetery. And they all described her the same way. This girl with dark hair who was trying to hitch rides. Now, the problem is that the people who were describing this girl didn't have to describe her much because they could tell you what her name was because they knew her. And she had been dead since March 10th of 1934 when she was in a traffic accident and died. And her name was Marie Bergovi. And she lived in back of the yards, and she used to go down to the Willowbrook Ballroom, which was the O. Henry when she was alive, and down on Archer Avenue. And she was buried in Resurrection Cemetery. And the first ghost story was from a cemetery caretaker who told this friend of his, hey, listen, I keep seeing a ghost in the cemetery. She's pretty, got dark hair. She's wearing an orchid-colored dress, and I keep seeing her. And the guy said, you got to give me more of a description. And he did. And he goes, I just buried her. Because the guy he was telling the story to was a guy named John Satala who had buried Marie Bergovi like a few weeks before the story started. So all these people that were saying they were seeing this girl trying to hitch a ride recognized Marie. But these people who keep picking her up, wanting to ride to the cemetery, all said she was blonde. So there's two different women, I think, at least two, who have created this legend of Resurrection Mary. And there were a couple of different blondes that also died that were buried in the cemetery. And it may be them. The only one I'm relatively sure about is Marie.
That is awesome.
The funny thing about it is I could never find a photo of her because all the photos came out of were like newspaper images, and they were all like drawn, the way they used to do sometimes in the 20s and 30s. So I could never find a picture of her. Well, then I had this woman who contacted me, and she said, hey, I know you've been writing a lot about Resurrection Mary, but would you like to have a picture of her? I'm like, yeah.
You have a picture of her?
I do. This woman, Marie, was a friend of her grandmother's. And I have a picture of the two of them together. Marie and her grandmother were taken.
How close does it look to the newspaper?
Exactly. It's her. It's definitely her with the dark hair and everything. But it's like, wow, I finally found it. Now it's a tangible thing. It's not just newspaper stories or newspaper records or I know where the Bergovi family lived and all this jazz. Now I've got an actual picture of her. So that really brought it to life. But that's absolutely my favorite story.
I love that. When I first
love this.
Yeah, I was very young when I watched that episode. But it's still, and the crazy part is I have not watched it since. I've watched that one time, that episode. Have not watched it since, but I still remember because I want to say, did they interview the guy who saw Jerry Palis.
Yes,
that was him.
That was the guy. He picked her up.
I didn't know his name.
Yeah, he picked her up and he told that story for the rest of his life.
But no, that was the cabbie, right?
No, this was the guy that picked her up at the dance.
So
That
when
spent the
went
evening
back,
with her.
So he knocked on her door, and her
Yes.
mom was like, I still remember that
Yes.
because he described in
Yes.
detail what he went back to. He wanted to date her. He's like, she
Right.
was a foxy lady,
Yeah,
and I picked
yeah.
her up, and I didn't
Yeah.
get her name and number or whatever.
Yeah.
And and she's like, my daughter's been
Damn.
dead.
And it's,
Imagine
and it's
that.
like, these are all the elements of the urban legend. But the thing is, this story, I always say that Resurrection Mary is not a Vanishing Hitchhiker story. She's the Vanishing Hitchhiker story, because I think a lot of the legends have grown from her. Now, I mean, Vanishing Hitchhiker stories have been around since horse and buggy days, but I think that so much of the modern automobile legend that we have came from her story,
That makes
of
sense.
elements of her story, of them telling it and retelling it all these years.
Illinois made.
Yeah, that's right.
It's
That is
really
right.
Cool. What is your favorite besides? So is she in here? Because I haven't
Yeah.
read this entirety
Yep,
of
I
it. I'm
have.
not gonna
I
lie.
She is in there.
Me and my daughter are going.
Didn't you want to ask
slowly
about the
through it.
kangaroos before we
Yeah,
go?
the
Yeah,
kangaroos.
ask about
the kangaroos.
What's with the kangaroos?
I don't
and-
know. That's one of those. That's one of those weird animal stories that, like, alligators in Lake Decatur
Okay.
and kangaroos that have been seen. And
All right, so anything you want to plug before we go?
yeah. Let me. Well, we plugged the tours and we plugged the
did.
museum. So
Yep.
we're reopening January 17th.
Fuck
we'll be
yes.
downtown where the Snyder Building is, American Oddities Museum. Just drop in and see us. It is a cool place. I mean, I didn't really talk about the things we had other than haunted things. We got a huge sideshow section, and then we got a true crime thing. I picked up all this stuff over the years, and I've got parts of Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment building. Oh, I got a fork from Lizzie Borden.
Oh.
Yeah, it's
I was
it's
born on her
engraved.
birthday.
It's engraved
I
with
was
her
born on
name,
Lizzie's
and it came out of her cousin's estate. I've got all the documentation and everything. So we got it. So I cleaned it up a little bit because I didn't want to clean it too much, but I didn't want to clean it so you could see her name better. But then once I cleaned it, then I had to eat something with it because it's
what'd you
Lizzie
eat with
Borden's
it?
fork, some cake. But I mean, why not? Well, you got to eat something, right? So. But yeah, so I've got a lot of cool stuff. So come by, see us. The tours will start. Well, our next dinner tours.
And you no
are
longer have
January.
the guillotine, right?
I do still have the
Oh,
guillotine. I
okay.
kept the guillotine because it's funny.
Okay.
yeah.
People
My
like
daughter
people
remembered
like to have their
that.
pictures taken with the guillotine. So I did keep the guillotine. So we will still have that.
Those might come in handy in
yeah.
the future.
Well, that's what I thought too. But we'd have to replace the cardboard blade with the real thing. But
Absolutely,
still,
yeah.
it still could come in handy. Also, I do a podcast, the American Hauntings podcast. Now we have a network. Now we have 3 shows. I know it's
hell
not
yeah.
really a network, but we're getting there. But we do American Hauntings. We do one season all with one theme. We've got a buddy of mine who does one called American Dread, which is like Midwest crime stories. And then I do one called American Nightmares, which is the history of horror in America, starting with mostly real things and how it affected the horror genre. At least I'll get there. I'm only in the 4th episode, so we'll get there. But that's the American Hauntings podcast. You can find it on Spotify, everywhere, Apple, everywhere that you find that stuff. Also, we do have a food drive coming up in February. February 7th is our 26th annual food drive. We do it toward the end of winter. We call it our Dead of Winter event to collect stuff for the food pantries because by February they're getting a little tapped out. And I think this year especially they're going to need it more than ever.
Yes.
So we will be doing that, and we're doing that at Franklin Lodge this year. It's always a ghost theme. I bring in speakers, and it's free to attend the afternoon events. All you have to do is bring canned good, food item, non-perishable item, toilet paper, anything that people can use for the food banks. We usually end up with a couple of truckloads of stuff.
Good.
The ghost people are very generous people. We've discovered that over the years. But then all I'll say is that if you're local, come by the museum and see us. If you're not local, AmericanHauntings.net is kind of the that will get you everywhere you need to go in all one place. So it all connects. So yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
Well, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much. I love this episode.
Oh, thanks.
It
was
love
fun.
all your books that I've read. I like the podcast you have with Cody.
It's a lot of fun.
so far we've learned about like an elf on the shelf, like doll, and then also like a thieving kind of cock. It's in the corner of the room. Like, so these are some cool ghosts I didn't know about. I don't know a lot of the Alton ghost stories.
Thief cook.
Thief cook. Like, it's been cool. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. Oh,